The ring was not mine. I had worn it for one night, a borrowed diamond the size of a threat, to play a woman I was not. The fiancée of Vesna Auteri, who was 39 and an alpha and the chief executive of the largest private holding company in the city, and who had paid me to stand at her side for the length of a single charity gala and then hand it all back. I was 26. My name is Yara Haddad, and I was an out-of-work actress in a rented gown, and the gala was over and the ballroom was emptying, and I did the last thing I had been hired to do, which was to slide the diamond off my finger and hold it out to her across the small distance between us. She did not take it. She looked at my open hand for a long moment, at the ring catching the last of the chandelier light, and then she looked at me, and she said the two words I have never once stopped hearing since. Keep it on.
Hi everyone! Thank you for staying with me. Subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Stay close, stay connected.
If you want to hear uncensored, too hot for YouTube stories, check out my Patreon in the description. Tell us where you are watching from and subscribe. I want to back up first. I want to back up to the version of my life where a diamond was just a prop and a powerful woman was just a client. And I did not yet know that a person could ruin you slowly, gently over months, by simply refusing to let a thing end that both of you had agreed would end. I had been ruined quickly before, the ordinary way, by ordinary people. I had no defense at all against being ruined the way Vesna Auteri ruined me, which was carefully at her own expense, one deferred ending at a time. Let me tell you how it started, because the how matters. I was catering. That was the truth of my life that autumn. I had a degree in a thing no one would pay me for, and a talent no casting director would look at twice. And so I carried trays of small, expensive food through rooms full of people who did not see the person carrying them, which I was good at. Being unseen, I had a genius for it. And at one of those events, a shareholder dinner in a glass room 40 floors above the harbor, I was refilling water at a table when a woman 3 seats down watched me do it for longer than a woman like that watches anyone. And 8 days later, a very discreet person from a very discreet office called the agency and asked for me by name. The offer was insane, and I said yes before he finished explaining it, because I was 3 weeks behind on rent, and because insane offers do not come twice. Vesna Auteri needed a fiancé, not a real one. A real one was apparently the last thing on earth she wanted. She needed the appearance of one, for reasons the discreet man laid out in a way that told me almost nothing, and I would learn the whole of them slowly over the months that followed. There was a merger. There was a board. There was, at the center of it, a rival on that board named Adrienne Roth, who had spent 2 years maneuvering to force a marriage of alliance between her own house and Vesna's company. A marriage that would have handed Roth a seat at the head of everything Vesna had built. And the one thing that made such a marriage unforceable, in the strange old-blooded world these people lived in, was a fiancé already standing in the way. An engagement was a wall. Vesna Auteri needed a wall for exactly one gala, the autumn benefit where the board and Roth and all of that world would be watching. And she had chosen, out of a whole city, the invisible woman who refilled the water. I asked the discreet man why me. He said, "Miss Auteri does not explain her choices." I would ask that question many more times before I got the answer. And the answer, when it finally came, was not one I could have survived hearing that first day. I should tell you about the invisibility, because it is the thing she saw and the thing the whole story turns on, and you cannot understand what she gave me unless you understand what I had made of myself. I had wanted once to be looked at. That is the private joke of my life. I went to a real school for it, and I stood on real stages. And for a few years, I believed the thing they tell you, that if you are good enough and you want it enough, the looking will come. And then the ordinary machinery of that world did to me what it does to most, which is nothing, a slow grinding nothing, a decade of rooms where I was almost right and never chosen. until wanting to be looked at came to feel like a kind of illness I was ashamed of. And I did the thing you do to survive it, which is to fold the wanting up small and put it away and become excellent instead at not being seen. I got a job carrying trays precisely because it was the opposite of a stage. I made myself into furniture on purpose. It is a strange grief to be a person who trained her whole youth to be watched and then built her whole adulthood out of the skill of disappearing. And I carried that grief so quietly that I had almost convinced myself it was gone. And then a woman watched me pour a glass of water. That is the whole absurd hinge of my life. In a room built entirely for people to be seen in, full of the most seen people in the city, the one who could not stop watching was watching the invisible woman doing the invisible thing. And she was watching, I would learn, precisely because I did it as though no one were there, which in that room of performers was the only real thing on offer. She did not fall for a performance. There was no performance. She fell, if that is even the word for what a woman that careful does, for the exact part of me I had spent 10 years hiding, the part that had given up on being looked at. And the terrible, beautiful joke of the whole year was that the invisibility I was most ashamed of was the thing that finally got me seen. I did not know any of that at the start, of course. At the start, I only knew that a rich woman wanted to rent my face for a night, and that I needed the rent, and that some starved thing in me that I thought I had killed sat up the first time she looked at me and quietly said, "Oh, there you are." The first time I met her properly was the night of the gala, in a suite where a stylist had spent 3 hours turning a broke actress into something that could stand beside an empire. She came in already dressed, in a suit so dark, it read black until the light found the deep oxblood of it. And she stopped just inside the door and looked at me the way she had looked at me over the water 3 weeks before, completely, without hurry, as if there were all the time in the world and she intended to spend it here. She had deep burgundy auburn hair, pulled into a low twist, and eyes that were a green I did not have a word for, and on her right wrist a thin gold cuff bracelet that she wore like other people wear a wedding band. And when she crossed the room to me, she moved with an economy that made everything around her look like it was trying too hard. She took my Hannah the first time she touched me, and it was to inspect, not to hold. And she slid the diamond onto my finger herself. And it was cold, and it was heavy, and it did not fit, quite. And she looked at it there, and something moved at the corner of her mouth. Not a smile, a single acknowledgement. Then she pressed her thumb once along the inside of the gold cuff on her own wrist. A small private gesture I would come to know better than my own heartbeat. And she said, in a low, unhurried voice that never once in all the months to come rose above exactly that pitch, "You don't have to be anyone tonight. You only have to let me be seen choosing you. Can you do that?" I said, "That's the whole job." The corner of her mouth again. She said, "We'll see." Why me? Why, out of a whole city of women who would have killed for the part, the one who carried the trays? I did not ask it that night. That night I was too busy being astonished by what it felt like to be chosen in front of 400 people by a woman like that. Because that was the job, and she was extraordinary at it. She put her hand at the small of my back and she introduced me to the board and to Adrienne Roth herself with a warmth so exact and so total that I, who knew it was a performance, half believed it. And I watched Roth's smooth, handsome face do the small, ugly thing a face does when a plan of 2 years dies in front of it. And I understood that I was a wall, and that the wall was working, and that I had never in my life felt so seen and so useful at the same time. And at the end of the night, in the emptying ballroom, I took the ring off and held it out, because that was the deal, one gala, and she did not take it. And she said, "Keep it on," and the deal, though neither of us said so, quietly stopped being the deal. I want to say something first before I tell you the rest, because it is the thing the whole story turns on. I had spent my life being hired and used and released cleanly, the way you use a caterer. Everyone who had ever wanted something from me had taken it and let me go the moment the taking was done. And here was a woman who had every reason in the world to let me go. The gala was over. The wall had held. She owed me nothing but the fee. and she looked at a ring in my open hand and could not, for reasons she would not explain for months, make herself take it back. That was the first deferred ending. There would be so many. Let me tell you the shape of the months that followed, because the months are the whole story. She kept extending it. That is the plainest way to say it. There was always a reason. The merger was not final, Roth was not finished. The board wanted to see the engaged couple at the winter meetings. Her mother expected to meet the fiancé at the estate over the holidays. Each reason was true. Each reason was also, I came to understand very slowly, a thing she went looking for, the way a person who does not want a book to end goes looking for reasons to read one more chapter. Every few weeks, I would try carefully to raise the ending. I would say something about the arrangement, about when it would be done, about giving the ring back. And she would listen to the whole of it, completely, without hurry. And then she would say 2 words, the same 2 words, and the ending would recede another month. Not yet. She said it the way she said everything, evenly, as a fact and not a plea. Not yet. The merger. Not yet. The board. Not yet. My mother. And I let it recede every time, and I told myself it was the money, which I needed, which she paid with an almost insulting generosity. And it was the money for exactly as long as I could make myself believe it was only the money, which was not very long at all. The second event was a winter fundraiser, and it was the night I learned that the hardest part of the job was not the performing. It was the stopping. We were flawless in the room. By then, we had a machine of small gestures. She would find me across a crowd, and her whole face would do the thing that made 400 people believe it. And I had learned to answer it, to lean into the hand at my back, to laugh at the private joke we did not have, to be, for 3 hours, a woman luminously certain she was loved. And I was good at it, better than I had ever been at any part I was ever paid to want. Because the terrible secret of it was that I was not acting. I was simply letting one true thing show and calling it a performance so that both of us could survive it. And then the car. That was the part no one warned me about. The performance ended at the coat check, and the machine switched off, and we rode home through the dark city in a silence that had a texture. And she sat on her side and I sat on mine with 8 inches of cold leather between us. And the woman who had held me all night by the small of my back would not, now that it was only us, let her hand cross those 8 inches. I used to watch the 8 inches. I am not proud of it. I would sit in the dark and measure them and think about how in the lit room there had been no distance at all. And here in the true dark, there was all of it. And I could not work out which room was the lie, and the not working it out was slowly taking me apart. That second night at my door, she did an unbearable small thing. She reached over. I thought for one detonating second that the 8 inches were going to close. And she straightened the strap of the borrowed gown where it had slipped at my shoulder. One precise adjustment, the way you would fix a thing on a mannequin. And then she took her hand back and pressed her thumb to the gold cuff and said, in the surgical voice, "You were very good tonight. Sleep." And she was gone. And I stood at my own door with my hand where the strap had been, and understood that she had found the single millimeter of touching that the arrangement allowed her, and had spent exactly that millimeter, and not 1 degree more, and that the rationing of it, the awful precision of the rationing, was the most unguarded thing she had shown me yet. The first month I cataloged her, because it is the only thing I have ever known how to do with a feeling too large to hold. I cataloged the gold cuff bracelet, and the way she ran her thumb along the inside of it when she was deciding something, which I learned to read the way sailors read a sky. I cataloged the burgundy hair and the low twist, and the 2 loose strands that escaped it by the end of every long day. I cataloged the green of her eyes, which was darker in the morning and lighter under chandeliers, as if the woman recalibrated to the room. I cataloged her scent, which I could not help, which was amber and cold black tea, and something underneath like struck metal, and which began, to my private horror, to be the thing that told me she had entered a room before I turned to see her. I cataloged the voice that never rose. I cataloged the fact that in public, she touched me constantly. a hand at the small of my back, at my elbow, at the nape of my neck, the whole warm architecture of a woman in love. And that in private, behind the closed door, when the audience was gone, she did not touch me at all. Not once. The performance was all heat, and the private was all distance, and I lived in the strange country between them. And I could not tell you which one was the lie. By the winter, I knew the shape of her hands better than the shape of my own future. Bex saw it before I did. Because she was 24 and my roommate and had not yet learned to keep her face out of other people's business. Bex worked the same catering shifts I was slowly stopping needing. And she watched me come home from Vesna's world in borrowed clothes with a diamond I had to lock in a drawer. And one night in our narrow kitchen, she said, "You know that's not a job face you've got. That's a girl who's in trouble face." And I told her it was absolutely a job, the most job there had ever been, a contract and a fee and an end date. And Bex looked at me with the terrible clarity of the young and said, "Sure. What's the end date then?" And I did not have one. Because every time I reached for it, Vesna said, "Not yet." And Bex saw me not have one, and she did the kind thing, which was to let it go. And she made us tea in the 2 chipped mugs that were the whole of what we owned. And she did not say the other thing, which was that people with real end dates can always tell you what they are. I lay awake that night turning her grandmother's brass ring. My grandmother's, I mean. The thin, worthless brass ring I wore on a chain against my chest. The only ring I actually owned. Turning it over and over, and thinking about the cold, heavy borrowed diamond locked in the drawer, and how one of them was real and cost nothing, and one of them was a fortune and was a lie, and how I could no longer entirely tell which was which. The money was the part I could not make clean, and I want to be honest about it because it is the reason the ending mattered as much as it did. She paid me. That was the fact under all the other facts. Every 2 weeks, a sum arrived in an account that had never held a sum like it. And it paid Bex's half of the rent and mine. And it paid the dentist I had been putting off for 2 years. And it sent a little home to a mother who thought I had finally landed a real acting job, which in a way I had. And I was grateful for it, and I was ashamed of it in exactly equal measure. Because the same money that was saving my life was also the thing that made everything I felt suspect, even to me. When she was kind, a voice in me said, "She is paying you to let her be kind." When she looked at me too long, the voice said, "You are a line item." I could not trust a single thing I felt because I could not find the edge where the employee ended and the woman began. And I understood slowly that this was not a flaw in me. It was the trap the whole arrangement was built out of. You cannot know if a cage thing loves you. That is the oldest problem there is. And Vesna, who was cleverer than me about everything, had understood it from the first night, which is why she would not touch me, which is why the 8 inches in the car stayed 8 inches. And I did not understand any of that yet. I only knew that the money made me doubt the one true thing in my life, and that I hated it, and that I needed it, and that both of those were the arrangement working exactly as designed. I tried to give some of it back once. I said the fee was too much, that I had not done enough to earn it. And she looked at me with something almost like pain, and she said, "I am not going to let you make it smaller so it hurts you less." And she did not explain it, and I did not understand it. And it was, I see now, the closest she came in all those months to telling me the truth, that she knew exactly what the money was doing to me, and that she was paying it anyway because ending it was the one thing she could not yet make herself do. Why was she being kind to me? That is a different question from why she chose me. And it is the one that started to keep me awake. Because she was kind, and it was not the kindness of an employer. When the winter board meetings ran late and cold, she would have food sent to wherever I was waiting, the specific food I liked, which I had never told her and she had simply noticed. When she learned, sideways, that I had wanted to act, she began without ceremony to ask my read on things, on a speech, on a room, on a person's real meaning under their words, as if my one useless talent were suddenly worth something. And she listened to my answers the way she listened to her own board completely. And I had not been listened to like that ever by anyone, and it undid me more than any touch would have. One of those late nights, she caught me turning the brass ring on its chain, and she went still the way she did, and she said, "That's the one you actually wear." And I said it was my grandmother's. It was nothing. It was brass. And she looked at it for a long moment, and she said, in the surgical voice with something underneath it, "The things people actually wear are never nothing." And she did not say anything else. And she did not touch it. And she did not touch me. But the next morning, the borrowed diamond felt heavier on my hand than it ever had, and the brass ring felt warmer against my chest. And I understood that she had seen, in 4 words about a piece of brass, the entire truth of me. That I was a person who kept the real cheap thing and performed the expensive fake one, and that she had seen it because it was I would learn the exact truth of her too. By the new year, the arrangement had stopped looking anything like an arrangement to everyone except the 2 of us who insisted it was one. We had a routine. That was the danger of it. On the nights before the public events, she would come to wherever I was and we would build the evening the way I imagine other couples build a life, deciding what we would say and how we would stand and which lie we would tell about how we met. And it was the best hour of my week. Every week. That hour of inventing a love with a woman I was falling into for real. And the cruelty of it was so precise that I sometimes thought she had designed it that way, though she had not. She was drowning in exactly the same water and hiding it exactly as well. Once building an evening, we reached for the same page of the seating plan, and our hands met over it. Really met, skin for the first time outside the performance, and we both went absolutely still. In public, she touched me 100 times a night. This was different because there was no one to perform it for. This was just her hand on my hand in an empty room, and I felt the whole architecture of her discipline shake, once, like a struck wire. And then she drew her hand back, carefully, not fast, which was so much worse. And she pressed her thumb hard along the inside of the gold cuff, and she said, "We should confirm the Halverson table." And we confirmed the Halverson table. That was everything. That was the whole of what I got for months, and I would not have traded that struck wire second for anyone else's whole life. There was a night she let me see the real thing under the empire, and it is the night I stopped being able to pretend the want was only mine. It was late, past the work, and she had had a hard board day, and she was not for once entirely armored, and she poured 2 glasses of something old and expensive and did not touch hers. And she told me a thing she had never told anyone, which was how she had grown up. Not rich. That was the secret under the suits. Her mother's great cold house and old blood had come to almost nothing by the time Vesna was small. A name and a draft and a proud woman selling the paintings off the walls one at a time to keep the roof. And Vesna had built the whole enormous edifice of her life out of the specific terror of a child who has watched the floor go out from under a family that was supposed to be untouchable. She had made herself unmovable, she said, on purpose, because the one lesson of her childhood was that anything could be taken. And she ran her thumb along the inside of the gold cuff, and she said, almost to herself, this was hers. When there was nothing left, it was the one thing I wouldn't let them sell. And I understood sitting there that the disciplined, untouchable woman half the city feared was doing the exact thing I did, wearing the cheap, true, beloved thing that no money could touch, and performing the expensive, invulnerable one for the world. And that when she had looked at my brass ring and said the things people actually wear are never nothing, she had been telling me she had one too. I did not touch her. I wanted to more than I have ever wanted anything, in that soft, lamplit moment when she was, for once, only a person. But I had learned the geography of her restraint by then, and I understood that if either of us was going to cross the 8 inches, it could not be me, not while she was paying my rent, because a yes from a paid woman is not a yes, and some part of me had begun, without knowing it, to protect her the way she was protecting me. So I sat with my hands around a glass I did not drink either, and I let her be seen all the way down without reaching for her. And I think that was the night we both understood that the arrangement had become the only lie left, and that neither of us knew how to be the one to end it. The building of the evenings was the part I could not defend myself against. And I want to tell you about it because it is where the real damage was done, gently, week after week. Before every public event, we built it together. The story of us. What a couple must have, a real one, is a shared past. And we did not have one, so we made one, at a long table with the seating plan spread out, and it became, without either of us admitting it, the center of my whole week. We decided how we had met and revised it again, and the revising was the thing. Because to invent a love with someone, you have to imagine, in detail out loud, the way you would have fallen for them if the world had let you. And we did that, every week for months. Two women describing to each other exactly how they would have come to love one another if there had been no fee and no arrangement between them, and calling it a cover story. She would say, we met at the bookshop on Almwood, you dropped something, and I would say, you picked it up. And she would say, no, I watched you pick it up and I made up a reason to talk to you, and go still, because that one had come out too true. And then she would move us briskly onto the timeline. We built a whole false history that was, in every particular, a confession neither of us could make directly, and I do not think a single word of it was actually false. That is the thing about it I still cannot get over. We told the truth for months and swore the whole time that we were lying. One of those nights she was drafting the story of how she would have proposed, a detail the board would ask about, she said, and it was also the most unbearable hour of the year. And she got halfway into it. A description of a specific evening, a specific light, the exact thing she would have said, and she stopped. She just stopped in the middle of it, with her thumb on the gold cuff. And she did not finish, and I did not make her. And the unfinished proposal sat there on the table between us, more real than any of the finished lies. And after a moment she said, very low, in the surgical voice with the whole of her underneath it, we'll use a different version. That one's not for them. And she folded the seating plan, and the moment closed and I went home and lay awake, understanding that she had written me a real proposal, and then refused to spend it on a lie, that she was saving it, that a woman who assumed nothing and wasted nothing was quietly keeping the true version of a thing back for a day she would not let herself believe in. That one's not for them. I turned it over for weeks. It meant there was a version that was for me. It meant she had one, ready, held back, waiting for a world in which she was allowed to say it. And I could not ask her about it, because asking would have made her say either that I had imagined it or that I had not, and I was not brave enough for either answer. And so I carried it, the way I carried the brass ring, a real thing kept secret against my chest, and I told no one. And I let another month go by, and the knot yet held. Miriam Osei had run Vesna Auteri's office for 20 years and had buried a husband and raised the woman half the city was afraid of. And she was the one who named it, because someone always is. She was 63 and unsentimental, and she had watched a great many people try to get close to her employer and fail. And she watched me not try, which I think is what made her decide to speak to me. It was a gray afternoon in the anteroom of Vesna's office, and Miriam was sorting the day, and without looking up from it, she said, she has never once extended an arrangement in 20 years. And I said, I'm sorry? And Miriam said, contracts, deals, terms. She sets an end date and she honors it to the hour. Always has. It's the thing they fear about her, that she cannot be moved once a thing is agreed. And Miriam squared a stack of papers and said the thing I carried for months after. She said, you are the only agreement I have ever seen that woman refuse to let end. I have worked for her for 20 years. I would think very carefully if I were you about what that means, because she is not thinking about it at all, which is how you know it is real. I told Miriam she was reading too much into a business relationship. I was extraordinarily good that whole year at telling people they were reading too much into things. I did try to end it once, myself, and the way it failed told me everything I was not yet ready to know. It was after the estate, when the not knowing had gotten too heavy to carry, and I decided, in the cold, clear way you decide things at 3 a.m, that I would be the brave one, that I would give the ring back and free us both, before the thing broke something that could not be mended. I rehearsed it. I am an actress. I rehearsed the ending like a monologue, every word, so that I could get through it without my voice betraying me. And I went to her office, and I closed the door, and I took the diamond off, and I set it on the desk between us, and I said the speech, all of it clean, that the merger was nearly done, that she did not need the wall much longer, that we should set a real end date, that I would always be grateful. I got through the whole thing. I was very good, and she listened to the whole of it, completely, without hurry, the way she listened to everything. And when I was done, she did not argue, and she did not perform. She just looked at the ring on the desk for a long moment, and then she picked it up. And instead of taking it back, she reached across the desk and took my hand and put it back on my finger herself, the way she had the very first night, cold and heavy and not quite fitting. And she pressed her thumb along the inside of the gold cuff and she said, "Not yet." And I said, and my rehearsed calm finally broke here. I could not help it. I said, "You keep saying that. When? When is it, Vesna? Give me a date and I'll hold to it. I swear I will. Just give me the date." And she was quiet for a long time, longer than she had ever been quiet with me. And something moved behind the green of her eyes that I had never seen there, something close to fear, and she said, at last, very low, "I don't have one." And that was the whole confession, though I did not understand it then. I heard it as a woman being evasive. It was the opposite. It was the most honest thing she had said to me in months. A woman who scheduled everything, who honored every date to the hour, admitting she could not name the day she would let me go because there was no such day, because she did not want there to be one, because the not yet was not a delay. It was a hope she was too disciplined and too decent to speak. I put the ring back in the drawer that night, and I did not try to end it again. I told myself I had failed out of weakness. I had actually failed because I had asked a woman for the date she would stop loving me, and she had been unable to invent one. And neither of us had the courage yet to call that what it was, the not yet held. It would hold until Roth put a folder on a desk and made not yet impossible. And I have thought, since, that we might have gone on like that for years, two honest people telling each other one enormous lie, if a cruel woman had not accidentally forced us to be brave. Adrienne Roth was not finished, and in the late winter she began quietly to pull at the one loose thread in Vesna's wall, which was me. She was too clever to accuse. She simply began to ask, at the events with that smooth, handsome patience, small questions about how we had met, about my family, about where a woman like me had come from, the questions you ask when you already suspect the answer and are only assembling the proof. I felt her assembling it. I had spent my life being invisible. And the flip side of that talent is that I can feel exactly when someone has decided to look. And Roth had decided to look, and what she was looking for was the receipt, the fee, the arrangement, the thing that would let her stand up in front of that whole old-blooded world and say the engagement was bought, that the wall was paper, that Vesna Auteri had lied to the board and to her dying mother and to everyone, and take the empire in the wreckage. Vesna knew. Of course she knew. She saw everything. And instead of pulling me back to safety, she did a thing I did not understand until much later. She pulled me closer. She made me more visible, not less. She put me at the head of tables and in the frame of every photograph. And I thought it was strategy. And it was the opposite of strategy. It was a woman who had decided that if the wall was going to fall, she would at least have stood in the open with me first. But I did not know that yet. I only knew that the danger was rising, and that she met it by keeping me nearer, and that being kept near by Vesna Auteri was the most dangerous safe I have ever felt. Why keep me near, when keeping me near was the risk? I turned it over on every long drive home. A woman that discipline does not increase her own exposure by accident. She was doing it on purpose, and the only purpose that fit was the one I could not let myself believe, that somewhere in the months of not yet she had stopped being able to tell the wall from the want, and had chosen, if it came to it, the want. There was a night in February when Roth got close enough that I felt the whole thing nearly come apart. And it is the night the danger and the wanting braided together so tightly that I stopped being able to hold them separate. It was an opera benefit, the kind of evening built entirely so that a few dozen people could watch each other. And Roth had placed herself in our box, uninvited in the way powerful people are never quite uninvited. And she spent the first act not watching the stage, but watching us, patient, assembling. And I felt it, the looking, the specific weight of a person deciding to find the seam. And I felt myself begin to come apart under it the way I always had. The old invisibility rising up to save me, the urge to fold small and disappear. And Vesna felt me start to go. She always felt everything. And in the dark of the box, where it could have been the performance and was not, she took my hand off the velvet armrest and laced her fingers through mine and held on, hard. The first time she had ever held my hand in the dark, with no one able to see her do it. And she leaned in and put her mouth close to my ear, as though she were whispering something intimate for Roth's benefit. And what she actually said, so low it was almost only breath, was, "Stay. I have you. Don't disappear on me." And I did not disappear. I stayed, in the dark, with her hand crushing mine. And Roth watched a woman murmur to her fiancé and saw nothing at all of what was really happening, which was that Vesna Auteri had reached into the dark and caught me at the exact moment I was about to vanish and had refused to let me go. At the interval, she let go, because the lights came up and the performance resumed and her hand belonged again to the 400. But she had held it in the true dark, once, when there was no one to perform for, and I cataloged that. I put it in the drawer with the red-lit second over the seating plan, and I understood that the map I had drawn of her restraint had a mistake in it. She did not withhold the true touch because she did not feel it. She withheld it because she felt it so much that she did not trust herself to let it out except in the dark, in a crisis, disguised as a lie, for one held second at a time. And Roth left the box that night no closer to her proof, and I think a little more certain than ever that there was something here worth destroying. Because there is nothing that draws a person like Roth so surely as two people trying not to be seen loving each other. I lay awake after, and I did the thing I had promised myself I would stop doing. I let myself believe it. Just for the length of one night, in the safe dark of my own room, I let myself believe that a woman does not catch you in the dark and say, "I have you," unless she means it in the one way that cannot be paid for. And then the morning came, and the diamond was cold on my hand again, and the fee was in my account again, and the doubt came back, with the light, the way it always did, the trap doing its patient work. But I had believed it for one night. That was new. That was the crack the truth eventually came through. The holidays we spent at the estate, and it is the closest we came in all those months to the line going down, and she held it, and I understand now what it cost her to hold it. Her mother was dying. That was the private truth under the public one, the reason the engagement had to hold through the winter. A proud old alpha in a great cold house who wanted, before she went, to see her difficult, brilliant daughter settled, loved, him. And Vesna, who would lie to a board without a flicker, could not quite lie to her mother. And so the days at that estate were the strangest of the whole strange year, because in that house the performance and the truth wore the same face, and I could not always find the seam. She held my hand by her mother's fire, and I could not tell if it was for the old woman or for herself. She introduced me as the thing that made her life make sense, and her voice did not perform it. And I lay awake in a cold grand guest room down the hall from her, and turned the brass ring, and did not know anymore what was real. And I think that not knowing was the most honest we ever were before the end. On the last night, her mother took my hand, alone, and held it in her two papery ones, and she said, "She has never brought anyone home in 40 years. You understand what you are." And I did not then. But I have thought about it since, a dying woman's certainty, And I believe she saw in one evening what it took me a year and a public catastrophe to see. I went home from the estate, and I could not go back to my old life. And that frightened me more than the danger did. Bex had moved out by then. A boyfriend, a better flat, the ordinary forward motion of a life that had never been derailed by a diamond. And our narrow apartment was mine alone now, quieter. And I sat in it after the holidays, and I did the arithmetic I had been avoiding. The arrangement would end. It had to. Everything that is bought ends. And when it did, I would take off a diamond and give back a life and go back to carrying trays through rooms full of people who did not see me. And the unbearable part, the part I sat with in the quiet, was that I would go back to it having been seen once, all the way down, by the one person in the world who could see. And there is no returning from that. You cannot relearn how to be invisible after someone has looked at you like that. She had ruined me for my own life without laying a finger on me. And she had done it, I believed then, by accident, in the ordinary course of using me. And I did not know yet that it was the least accidental thing that had ever happened to either of us. Bex called me that week from her ordinary happy new life, and she said gently, "You have to ask her." And I said, "Ask her what?" And Bex said, "You know what? You have to ask her if it's real, because you're going to break either way, and at least if you ask, you'll break knowing." And I told her the thing I had been telling everyone for a year, that it was a business arrangement with an end date. And Bex was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Yara, you just called a woman you got paid to fake date your whole life." And she was right. And I hated that she was right, and I did not ask Vesna, because I was a coward, which I want on the record. Because asking might have ended it, and I was not ready for it to end. And the not being ready was its own answer. And I knew it. And I did nothing with the knowing for one more month, until Adrienne Roth did the thing that took the choice out of my cowardly hands. Adrienne Roth moved in the first week of March, and she timed it, the way clever, cruel people time things, for the exact moment it would do the most harm. There was to be a vote, the merger, the final one, the thing the whole year had been building toward. And 3 days before it, Roth came to Vesna, privately, with a folder. I was not in the room. I have only what Vesna told me after, and Vesna does not embellish. Roth had the arrangement. Not all of it, but enough. The agency, a payment, the shape of the deal. Enough to stand up at the vote and call the engagement a purchase. Enough to break Vesna in front of the board and the city and the dying woman at the estate. Unless. There is always an unless with people like Roth. The unless was that Vesna would withdraw from the merger, hand Roth the position she had spent 2 years reaching for, and quietly, cleanly, end the fiction of me. Do that, and the folder disappeared. Refuse, and Roth burned it all down. Vesna and the company and the invisible actress who had made the fatal mistake of being a paper wall. Vesna came to me that night. She did not have to. She could have managed it over my head the way my whole life had been managed over my head. She put the folder on my table. Miriam had gotten a copy. Miriam got everything. And she laid it face up in front of me, and she said, "You asked me once to tell you the truth about when this ends. Here it is. Roth can end it in 3 days and take everything, unless I let her take almost everything first." And she pressed her thumb to the gold cuff, and for the first time in a year, I watched Vesna Auteri be, for one moment, without a move to make. The room was very quiet. I understood the shape of it. There was a clean way, and the clean way was the one every advisor she had would have screamed for. "Pay me off." Let me sign the thing that said it had all been a business arrangement, which it had, on paper, been. Give Roth her withdrawal, keep the folder buried, let the fiction of me dissolve back into the catering staff it had come from, and salvage what could be salvaged. It would cost Vesna the merger and a great deal of pride and nothing else. It would cost me nothing but the truth, and the truth was already only a technicality. Because on paper I had been paid, on paper it had always been a lie. She was not going to do it. I knew that before she said it because she had told me the truth first, before the options, the way she always did with the things that mattered. She said, "I'm not going to pay you to disappear, Yara." And she said my name the way she had never quite said it in a year, not as a line in a performance. And I felt the whole architecture of the arrangement come down in that one plain use of my name. I said, "What's the other way?" She looked at me for a long moment. She ran her thumb along the gold cuff, one last time, deciding. And she said, "The other way is that I make it not a lie. But that one was never mine to choose. That one is only yours." I want to tell you about the 3 days, because I have never lived so slowly or so completely as I did inside them. She gave me the choice, and then she gave me room, which I have since decided is the rarest thing a powerful person can give, and the only true measure of one. She laid it out plainly, without performing it, which after a year of watching her perform love was its own kind of confession. She would tear up the arrangement, not amend it, tear it up, the fee, the terms, the receipt Roth was holding, all of it, so that there was no purchase to expose because there would be no purchase, so that whatever stood between us stood there for no reason on earth except that we had chosen it. Roth's folder would be worth nothing the moment there was no arrangement to describe, and the merger she would fight in the open, on the record, and probably lose. And she said the losing did not frighten her, that she had built the whole empire precisely so that one day she could afford to lose it for the right thing. And it only worked, she said. It was only right, if it was what I wanted, freely, with the fee gone and the contract ash and my rent no longer in her hands, and my whole future no longer anything she owned. I did not answer her that first night. She did not ask me to. That was the whole of the gift. She put the choice down between us, and then she left me alone with it, which no one had ever done, because everyone I had ever known wanted my yes faster than I could find it, and took my hesitation as a thing to be argued down. She argued nothing. She, who could move a boardroom with a sentence, who had built an empire out of the power to make people agree, deliberately unhandled me, and I understood that the not arguing was itself the truest thing she had ever done. Because a woman who wanted my yes for the wrong reasons would have used every weapon she had, and she had put them all down. I called Bex. Of course I called Bex. I told her the whole of it at last. The year, the fee, the not yet, the folder, the tearing up, all of it. And Bex was quiet for a long time on the end of the line, and then she said the thing that finally cut it loose. She said, "You've spent a year asking whether it's real because you got paid. But she's about to make it so you didn't. She's going to burn the money, so the only thing left is the answer." And Beck said gently, "You keep saying you can't trust what you feel because of the money." "Okay, she's taking the money away. So what do you feel?" And I sat in my quiet apartment with the brass ring in my fist, and I felt, under a year of doubt and self-protection, and the careful, invisible caution of my whole life, one enormous simple thing, and it had been there since a room with a fire in it, since a hand in the dark at the opera, since 2 words across an empty ballroom, and its name was yes. Miriam found me on the second day, in the anteroom, because Miriam found everyone. She did not ask what I had decided, she only said, "She tore it up this morning. The contract, before you even answered. I watched her do it, and I said, before I answered? Why would she do it before I answered?" And Miriam looked at me with 20 years of knowing that woman in her flat old eyes, and she said, "Because she needed you to choose with the money already gone, not with it dangling as a reward. She burned it first so your yes couldn't be bought and couldn't be bribed either. She made herself have nothing to offer you but herself." And Miriam squared a stack of papers and said, "In 20 years, I have never seen her make herself defenseless for anyone. You should know what you're saying yes to, and you should know she'd have torn it up and let you walk away and never said a word, if that was what you wanted. That's the part that would break your heart if you knew her like I do. She built the exit before she asked you to stay." I asked her, on the second night, why she had chosen me. The real answer, finally, a year late. And she was quiet for a long time, and then she gave it to me. And it reorganized the entire year. She said, "You refilled the water." A shareholder dinner 14 months ago. Everyone in that room was performing wealth at everyone else, and you moved through all of it completely unseen and completely yourself. And I watched you set a glass down in front of a man who did not thank you, and I thought, there is the only honest person in this building. I did not need a fiancé, Yara. I needed a wall, and I could have rented one anywhere. I chose the honest woman who refills the water because I had already, 14 months before I ever spoke to you, been unable to stop thinking about her. And I kept saying not yet, because the moment I let it end, I would have to go back to a life that did not have you in it. And I could not make myself say the words. And that was selfish, and it is the only selfish thing I have let myself do in 20 years. And I have hated it every single day. Because you were being paid, and a woman who is being paid cannot say a free yes. And I would rather lose the whole company than take a yes that wasn't yours. The room was very quiet. I sat with the whole of it. 14 months, a year of not yet, a woman who had chosen me before I ever knew she existed, and had spent every month since refusing to take the one thing she wanted, because taking it would have made it a purchase. And I understood that I was being handed the thing I had wanted my whole invisible life and never once believed I would get. Not to be used and released, to be chosen in the open for the true reason, and then set free so that whatever I did next would be mine. I said, Vesna. She said, yes. I said, tear it up, all of it. And she went still. I said, the fee, the contract, the folder, all of it. Tear it up, let Roth do her worst. Let the merger go. Because if there's no arrangement, then there's nothing to expose. And if there's nothing to expose, then the only thing left standing between us is whether I want this. And I do. I have wanted it since a room with a fire in it at your mother's house. And I'm choosing you with no fee and no contract and nothing you own. And there is nowhere I have to stand. Is that a free enough yes for you? She looked at me for a long time. The corner of her mouth moved, fuller than a single acknowledgement, fuller than I had earned in a year of watching for it. She said my name, only my name. She said, Yara. And then, at last, after a year of not yet, she let the line go down. What happened next was very small, and it was the largest thing that has ever happened to me. She reached out and she took my hand. Not to inspect and not to perform, the way she had taken it 100 times for 400 people, but the way you take the hand of a person you are done pretending about. And she turned it over, and she looked at the borrowed diamond that had never fit, and then she reached to my chest and lifted the thin brass ring on its chain, my grandmother's, the real cheap true one, and she held the two of them side by side in her palm for a moment, the fortune and the brass. And she understood the whole of what she was holding. And she said, lo, only for me, we'll get you one that's yours. And then she cupped my jaw, her thumb at my cheekbone, and this time it did not touch. This time it stayed. And she rested her forehead against mine in a room with no audience in it for the first time in a year. And she said the two words she had said across an empty ballroom the night this began. The two words that had always, underneath everything, meant stay, keep it on. And I kept it on. She kissed me once, then quiet, unhurried, the way she did everything. And I will not tell you more than that because some things are mine. She kissed me once, and it was not the end of anything. It was the plain beginning of the rest of it. Adrienne Roth's folder was worth exactly nothing. I'll tell you that much, because you have come this far and should not have to carry the fear any longer. You cannot expose a purchase that no longer exists. Vesna tore the arrangement up the next morning in front of Miriam and a lawyer, every page, the fee returned, the terms void, and when Roth stood up at the vote with her 2 years of patience in her folder of receipts, there was nothing in it but the record of a thing that had ended, a wall that had become, in the open, a real one. I was in the room for it. She asked me to be, which she had never done. The boardroom had always been the one place she kept me out of, the place the fiction did not need to go. And this time she asked me to sit at the back, and I understood only later that she wanted me there, because she was about to tell the truth in that room, and she would not tell it with me hidden. Roth rose with her folder and her smooth, patient certainty, And she laid the arrangement out for the whole board, the agency, the fee, the shape of the purchase. And I watched a year of my life turn into evidence in a stranger's mouth, and I waited for the floor to go out. And Vesna stood, unhurried, and ran her thumb once along the inside of the gold cuff, and she said, in the voice that never rose, that every word Ms. Roth had read was true, that she had hired a woman to stand beside her, that the engagement had begun as exactly the purchase described, and the room went to that specific silence that comes before a powerful person is destroyed. And then she said the rest of it. She said, and somewhere in the months that followed, I fell in love with her. And last week I tore the arrangement up and returned the fee, and asked her, with nothing left to offer, to stay. And she said yes. So the document my colleague is holding describes something that no longer exists. There is no arrangement. There is a woman I love in the back of this room who is free to leave and has chosen not to. You cannot expose that. You can only be told it, which I am now doing on the record in front of all of you, so that it can never again be used as a threat. And she looked at Roth and she said, "You brought me a receipt for a wall. I'm showing you a marriage. Vote however you like." They voted. She lost. Roth got her withdrawal and her position, and the thing she had maneuvered 2 years for, and it turned to ash in her hands in the getting. Because you cannot win a war whose prize the other person has just handed you freely in front of witnesses. She lost the merger, Vesna. She had told me she would, and she did. And she handed Roth the position and walked out of that boardroom having lost the thing she had built her whole life toward. And she told me that night, at the estate, by the fire, in front of her mother, that it was the cheapest thing she had ever paid for anything. And she has never once, in all the time since, said otherwise. Her mother lived to the spring, long enough. She held my hand again at the end, the two papery hands, and she said, "I told you that you understood what you were." And I said, "I do now." And she smiled the difficult family smile her daughter had. And she went not long after, easy, having seen the one thing she had waited 40 years to see. It is autumn again now, a year from the gala, and there is a ring on my finger that is mine. It is not the borrowed diamond. That one went back to whatever vault it came from the morning the arrangement died. This one is smaller, and it is real, and it fits. And beside it, on a chain against my chest where it has always been, is my grandmother's thin brass ring. The two of them together now, the true cheap one and the true small one. And no fortune size lie anywhere on me at all. I do not carry trays anymore, though I remember how, and I have learned not to be ashamed of the year I did. I act, a little, in small true rooms, because Vesna asked me one night why I had given up the only thing I loved, and I did not have a good answer. And a woman who tears up empires does not accept a bad answer to a question like that. Miriam pretends she is not pleased and is enormously pleased. Bex was maid of honor and cried and denied it. I act now in small true rooms, as I said, and she comes to every one of them and sits in the dark where I cannot always find her and watches me be looked at by strangers, which she tells me she loves and hates in exactly equal measure. Loves because it is the thing I gave up and got back. Hates because for 2 hours I belonged to a room instead of to her. She told me once, driving home from a tiny theater above a bakery, that she had spent a fortune in her life buying things that could not be taken, and that I was the only one that had ever chosen to stay, and that this frightened her more than the poverty of her childhood ever had, because a thing that chooses to stay can choose to go, and she would rather be afraid like that for the rest of her life than safe the way she used to be. I have thought about that a great deal. She built an empire so that nothing could ever be taken from her again. And then she tore a piece of it up on purpose to make sure the one thing she wanted could never be said to have been bought. There is no safer prison than the one she was raised to build, and she walked out of it, for me, into the open, where things can be lost, and called it the cheapest thing she ever paid for. She wrote me the proposal, in the end, the real one. The version that was never for them. She did it on an ordinary Tuesday with no audience anywhere, in the kitchen with flour on her hands from a thing she was pretending she knew how to bake. And she did not get down on one knee because that was not her. She simply put a small real ring on the counter between us and finished at last the sentence she had stopped in the middle of a year before at a table full of seating plans. I will not tell you what she said, because that one is mine. The way the brass ring is mine, a real thing kept against the chest. I will only tell you that she had been saving it for a world in which she was allowed to say it, and that she built that world herself, out of the wreckage of a merger she was glad to lose, and that when she finally said it, there was not one borrowed thing anywhere in the room. And on the nights when the house is quiet and the whole enormous unlikely shape of my life gets to be too much, Vesna finds me wherever I am. And she does not perform anything, because there is no one to perform for anymore, and there never will be again. And she takes my real hand in hers, and she runs her thumb once along the inside of the gold cuff she still wears, that tell I read now the way I read my own pulse. And I know before she says it what she is deciding. I asked her, last night, half asleep, whether she had really known since a woman refilled a glass of water 14 months before she ever said a word. She turned toward me in the dark. Something moved at the corner of her mouth, the acknowledgement I waited a year to be allowed to see. She said, I knew before the water was poured. I just needed you to be free before I let myself say it. And then, because she knew I was afraid of nothing now, and she said it anyway, the way you say a thing that has become a vow instead of a stipulation, she said the two words into the dark of the room where nothing between us is borrowed anymore. Keep it on. I said it back. Keep it on. 300. Onela Hazuro Luncha SR TE at.